Thanks very much for the introduction. Happy to be here today. Thanks for the invitation. Maybe just a quick word about whom I'm representing. I'm the CEO of SolarPower Europe. That's the European association representing the solar sector in Europe at large, along the whole supply chain. We have more than 300 members, always looking for new members, obviously, as well, to join. And we're shaping the framework conditions in Europe for solar to thrive, based in Brussels. Now, the solar framework conditions have been very good in the last couple of years. Solar has been growing exponentially, not only in Europe, but globally. In the latest report of the International Energy Agency of the IEA, looking into world energy investments, they have been finding that more investments are going in solar globally than any other technology, $500 billion versus $400 billion for the rest of the technologies. In Europe, in the last 2 years, we've been installing more than 100 gigawatt of solar in 2 years, 100 gigawatt of solar. That is equivalent to powering additional 30 million European homes. Our total solar fleet today in Europe is 260 gigawatt. Globally, we will be coming up with our latest global market outlook just next week at Intersolar in Munich. Globally, last year we have been installing some 450 gigawatt of solar, which is also a milestone. This very rapid growth, and by the way, we've always been surpassing our own expectations, not just expectations of others who have been forecasting solar. That exponential growth really gives us hope that we can remain close to 1.5 degrees Celsius when it comes to climate change. But we're not there yet. And I need to emphasize that. We're not there yet. Europe has set itself a goal to have 750 gigawatt of solar installed by 2030. We're at 260 gigawatt today. So there's still a way to go. Last year we installed 56 gigawatt of solar. We need to be on average at 70 gigawatt of solar annually in order to get there. So by now it is hopefully clear to everyone why we're doing all of that. It's not just green fantasy or green dreams. Every degree that we're moving away from these 1.5 degrees Celsius is costing us billions of euros. Money that cannot be invested in the challenges of our time, keeping our welfare, keeping our economies thriving, making sure that we're living in security. So climate protection and socio-economic welfare are intrinsically interlinked. And not just because of the costs of non-action when it comes to climate change, translated into devastating floods, translated into droughts, very hot weather here as well, into wildfires. But apart from these costs of non-actions, it is also clear by now that solar PV together with wind are just the cheapest energy technologies. And this is important as we know that especially in Europe we have a problem because our energy prices in Europe are still more than double what companies are paying in the US and even more what they're paying in China. So we have a problem. And this is why we need to bet on the cheapest technologies that we have, and that is solar and that is wind. And the good thing is that by now we're also overcoming one problem, cost-wise, that wind and solar is not here all day long. So we need to have 24/7 renewables. And this is where also one cost factor comes in, because by now solar plus batteries is cheaper than gas peakers. So also on that side, if you're combining PV and batteries, we're getting there, and that's latest Lazar figures. This is, we already see industries, and this is also very important, industries in Europe moving to places where they have abundant renewable energy. So I was just talking to the chemical sector last week, but also talking to other industries. They're telling me, okay, you know, for some of the industries we cannot move today or tomorrow, but we're looking into where we are making the next investments. We're looking into where do we have abundant renewables, because this is a huge factor when it comes to our competitiveness. So it is important for countries to look into how they can attract these companies, and renewables for sure is a very important factor. Every government has a self-interest to invest in renewables in order to be attractive for industry. So in essence, it's not a question on why we are doing it. You know, in the next years, the question is more about how are we doing it. And it's, by the way, also one thing that I need to emphasize, it's not a question of why we need the Green Deal, because you might have also seen some reports, also following the elections that we had just last weekend and the new leadership that will be coming in. There's been some reports that they might not take the Green Deal so important anymore. So there's not a question of why we need it, I think. The facts are speaking for itself, but about how. How are we getting to high electricity rates based on renewables that we need? At the moment, we're at an electrification rate of around about 22%. We need to be at 35% of electrification by 2030. That means getting electricity to transport, getting electricity into heating, powering energy-intensive companies. So that's the first how. How are we making sure as well that citizens are buying into this transition? Sometimes citizens are scared, not the least scared because of the huge changes ahead, and not the least because a recent study showed that 74% of media articles in Europe are against renewables and in favor of fossils. So that's also something noteworthy. So how are we making sure that they're not scared when they are asked to transition from gas boilers to heat pumps, from combustion engines to electric vehicles? And how are we channeling investments into the transition? So the investment question is one question that we need to urgently tackle. So 3 points, how we are getting there. We need to invest in infrastructure. We need to invest in grids, but most importantly also in flexibility. Now, on the grid side, it is clear that 70% of the renewables will be connected to decentralized grids, to distribution grids. So a lot of focus has to be on distribution grids, apart from obviously connecting countries on the transmission side. 30% of our grids are more than 40 years old, and they need to be digitalized. So that's the challenges ahead on the grid side. But most importantly, and I'm not, I want to emphasize that a lot, is that grids, we need to invest in grids in the most optimal way, and that is investing into a flexibility revolution. We need a lot of storage, 200 gigawatt by 2030. We need to collocate solar with wind, solar with storage. We need to incentivize also demand to follow production and so on and so forth. So we need a lot of flexibility in the system. We will be coming up with a study in the next 2 weeks. We call it Solar Mission 2040, where we will be looking exactly into the benefits of having more flexibility in the system. And what we already see as a little bit of a spoiler alert is that with more flexibility in the system, we're reducing the average day ahead power price significantly. We are decreasing annual energy investments and system costs by a 2-digit billion number. I'm not mentioning the number yet. 2-digit billion number in 2030 and 3-digit billion number in 2040, and that's also good news for the businesses here, while at the same time improving the business case for solar investments, because this is something that we see at the moment is very much under threat, given that grid connections are difficult, given that the more solar you put in the system, the price is deteriorating. So that's the first thing. Grids and flexibility are extremely important. The second thing is we need to unleash these investments into the energy transition. We need to not just look at the public space and what governments can do for us and what the European Investment Bank can do for us, but we need to make sure that private investments are crowded in. So we need to make sure that there is a thriving PPA market. We see that, for example, Spain is thriving on PPAs. You know, the huge investments that we saw in the last years, most of it has been triggered with PPAs. And we also need to reach smaller companies, because by now big companies are doing it because it just makes sense to do their activities on renewables. But for smaller, it's a little bit more difficult. So we as SolarPower Europe are working together with our wind colleagues. It's called Resource, the platform that we've been shaping, where we're bringing together demand and supply of renewables and make sure that there's more and more PPAs that can be signed. So PPAs, crowding in private investments, de-risking investments, CFDs are playing a major role. It is very important that we are using CFDs in a very predictable way for investors so that they know what the trajectory is and making sure that we are supporting and de-risking these investments with CFDs. And then there's also new business models, which are quite interesting for the smaller segments, but also for C&I. We have just been able to put energy sharing into the latest European rules, into the market design. So energy sharing should be possible as soon as it's implemented everywhere in Europe. That means that you can use your roof and put as much solar as you can on the roof and then share it with your neighbors. There's very nice examples. For example, in Portugal, one example I always love to mention, where a kindergarten has been, fully used, the roof of a kindergarten has been fully used to put solar on the roof, and then it's shared with the vulnerable customers around it in times when the kindergarten does not need the solar for their own purposes. It is reducing the energy bill for the kindergarten, it is reducing the energy bill for the households around the kindergarten, and they didn't even need to put these upfront investments because a company was doing it who is also getting benefits out of it. The same thing is happening in Portugal with a football stadium, which is sharing the energy with a cancer hospital. There's beautiful examples and another reason to go. And then we need to stop subsidizing fossil fuels very, very, very clearly. So that's the second point, crowding in investments, making sure we are facilitating investments. And then the third thing is that we need to communicate about the benefits that renewables bring to citizens, and we need to make sure that it's the other way around, not 74% of articles against renewables, but in favor of renewables. A couple of last words. We just had European elections. I was mentioning the new leaders, when they are installed, need to make sure that we are following up on what we decided. One of the most important things is that we want to get to 42.5% of renewables in the energy system by 2030. So we need to live up to these goals. I mentioned the reasons in the beginning why it just makes sense. And the European leaders need to work together with the 27 member states to facilitate this energy transition. Now, Romania, a beautiful sunny country, has all the prerequisites in order to go faster when it comes to solar. We have seen an impressive solar growth. Last year, 1.5 gigawatt of additional solar, which is great, with the support that you're giving also specifically to households, to rooftop solar with your investment program, Casa Verde. So that is really great to see. But Romania has much more potential still, and for the reasons I was mentioning in the beginning, it would be great to also unleash this potential. Huge project pipeline when it comes to utility scale solar, which can be harvested. So forecast is great. Romania is one of the front runners, but it's not the time to also really harvest this potential. So I wish you all the best for the discussions throughout the whole day. It's a pleasure being there. And I can also encourage you to support us in what we're doing and bringing these great framework conditions to everyone in Europe. Thanks very much. very much.